So we got a few minutes before class starts. Yeah, welcome. Beautiful. It turned out to be a beautiful day today after all the snow this morning. Yeah. So I'm still gardening away for people wanting to know what I'm up to. We're putting in some raised bed in the backyard, so we've been working at that. Hope you guys are doing good. Yeah. So we'll start in, I think, about 2 minutes. And so for people that were asking last time, we're doing the first 20 minutes on, I'm talking about self-expression in dance and creativity. And then we're going to, the next 20 minutes is Kizomba solo exercises. And the last 20 minutes is Cuban Salsa solo exercises. So, yeah. Always have a hard time not dancing when there's music on. Okay. Yeah, we still got 1 minute to go until it's 8 p.m. So I will probably keep these going until the end of May for now. And I usually take the summer off teaching mostly, so I'll probably do the same thing. But I will let you guys know what I decide to do. And we'll see how this all turns out. Hopefully we'll be back at it by September. Okay, so I think we're going to get started. So today I want to talk about breaking the rules, basically. That's going to be our topic today. So kind of being a little bit of a rebel in a good way and breaking the rules. And why is this so important? So if no one ever breaks the rule, there's no change. And how does the world evolve? How do we get new types of music and dancing and art and theater and inventions and new types of government and all of that? It is from people, certain people breaking the rules. So I do, and don't get me wrong, and you guys know from my teaching, I'm very much about learning the rules and knowing your foundation, but I'm also about creativity and breaking the rules once you know what you're doing. So, as I said before, like I was in the arts before, and every time there was a new art movement in the world, at that time they weren't popular. Why? Because they were inventing something new that people didn't understand, and that wasn't what was popular at that time. So the artists often that were popular in their time were not the people that were remembered from history, because they didn't bring anything new to the art. So for me, dance is a little bit the same. Like all of us have our own creativity, our own personality. We all have our own uniqueness to us. So if we bring that to the table, then we're able to create something different. And it can be in a big way, like inventing a new dance, or it can be a small way and doing a couple of moves in your dancing your way instead of the traditional way. So how do we get there? So there's a lot of things you can do. So I like to give myself challenges when I want to build on creativity. So you can, and I've done exercises like that with my students before, or in some videos. For example, for the next song, you can only use your right arm, we'll say, to express the song, or your hands, or all your movements. The start of all your movement needs to come from a certain body part, right? Like from the shoulder. You can move the rest of your body, but the movement comes from the shoulder. So by doing that, you're going to do things that you wouldn't necessarily do normally. Another thing would be to dance to a different type of music, the moves that you know. So it's going to make other things come out. Or dancing to one specific instrument in music and ignoring the other instruments, or telling yourself that you can't do any turns to the right, only turns to the left, or things like that. It's just putting in we can say like a handicap of some kind to your dancing, so that you have to come up with different solutions instead of doing the same thing you do every time. So all those types of exercises are great to do. So in a dance like salsa, it's a little bit harder to break the rules, because we do have a certain structure of the basic steps that we need to adhere to, where in Kizomba, we have a lot more freedom as far as the rhythm goes. However, there is still a certain posture and a certain way of moving that allows you to get the information and connect with your partner. So there are certain things, and that's why for me, a foundation is really important, because that's your foundation. It's your basic steps and your connection, and that's the basics of the dance language. And that's, especially when you're partner dancing, that's what allows you to dance with a partner seamlessly, right? That and connecting with your partner, and paying attention to them and trying to dance together. So how do you balance the two? So for me, as I said, I give myself exercises where I try to challenge myself to do things differently by taking away options that, I always do. You can, do songs where, I don't know, like in salsa, you're not allowed to do an enchufla in the whole song. Like, that's kind of a challenge for most, because most of the time we use a lot of enchuflas. So it's going to make you do different things. And maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. And whenever you do, we'll say mistakes, don't feel bad about it, because you gave yourself a hard challenge. Like, it's not about having things perfect, but it's about having new things come out of what you're doing. So it's just an exercise, right? And you can even do this, some of them socially, if you want to, as long as your partner, knows what's happening. Or sometimes I do like other exercises, like I only use basic 2 and basic 1 and basic 3, maybe, like the 3 first basics in Kizomba when I dance. And I try to see how I can express the song and how many variations I can find of just those 3 basics while I'm dancing, because that's going to bring depth to my basics, right? So it's not always about having more steps, but about knowing more ways to use them too. So as I was saying, putting, restrictions on what you allow yourself to do can help you step outside of your box. So, when you're solo dancing, you can basically do, break all the rules because you're solo dancing. You're not relying on someone else to dance with you. So, unless you're saying, oh, I'm doing a classical ballet dance and you're doing something with hip hop, you do want to, I guess, label what you're doing accordingly. But if you say I'm freestyling, you can basically do anything, right? And in social dancing, you can also say I'm doing a fusion dance, and you can break a lot of rules, including not sticking to your basic and, not always dancing with your partner. You can do all kinds of stuff. But if you're saying I'm dancing salsa, then I would, suggest to use your salsa basics at least, and yes, you can deviate from it. And I mean, my favorite style of Cuban salsa is timba, because you can deviate a lot from, the original salsa step. However, you need to know your count. So in your mind, you need to keep your 8 count at all times so that you can come back to it. Right? So there is always an awareness of the foundation. And in Kizomba too, you can change. We're going to talk today about changing your flow and the way that you're moving, and kind of stepping outside the box of your typical Kizomba walk. But you still need to be able to come back to it, and you still need to have a connection in a way that your partner knows what's happening. So I would just suggest for you to, just put some music, decide on an exercise. It can be any exercise. Put yourself some restrictions and try to be creative. Another great exercise that you can do, and this is a little harder without a partner, is, start dancing and get someone, or you can do it different ways, to say stop, for example. And you have to freeze in whatever position you're doing. And wherever you were planning to go, you have to find another way out of that position that you were in. So it might work a little bit easier in Kizomba than Cuban salsa, but things like that, kind of make you think outside of the box. And that's basically, and there's inspiration. You can get inspirations from all kinds of different styles of dance, right? So I found personally that dancing Kizomba has made me a better salsa dancer, because you take more outside the box in Kizomba, and it's brought more musicality out of my Cuban salsa dancing. So if you know about Cuban, like the history of dancing in Cuba, you'll know that there's there's the whole like Afro side of things, and there's a more like European side of dance, and they kind of coexisted and influenced each other. But there wasn't like, oh, like we invented this new dance called salsa, and now we're going to dance salsa. It wasn't like that, right? It was a slow transformation of things they already had, like the Cuban sun, that transformed both musically and dance-wise into, what they call casino, and we call salsa. But it was, evolutions of people changing slight things. And it's not just the dance, it's also the music, right? If your music doesn't change, often we don't change because we don't have a reason to. And this is very, very relevant to Kizomba, because the salsa in Kizomba, the music in Kizomba is evolving very, very, very rapidly, which is why the dance is evolving rapidly. Because if the songs all sound the same, we tend to stick to what we know. But if the music starts to change, then maybe some of the steps that you used to do or the styling you used to use kind of doesn't feel as good, and it's going to make you want to change something. And it's the same thing as I was saying. If you put yourself a restriction while you're dancing, different things are going to come out. So when the music is different things tend to come out. So it's just about, not being scared to do those things, because the people that are the most creative are people, they're not, better or have necessarily more ideas. They just have more practice at it. So by putting yourself in a situation where you don't really have a choice to be creative, it really builds, your ability in it. It's a skill like anything else. So it's the same thing, and it works in any area of your life, right? Like, you open the fridge, you wanted to make some dish, you're missing an ingredient. If you still want to do the dish without going to the store, you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to find another ingredient you can maybe replace it with, that you can still make the dish work, right? So every day, all day, we often have to be creative about certain things, and we get better at it the more we do it, because we get more confident and we understand more, how to do that and get more comfortable with it. So that's, I don't really want to do exercises with you guys, because I don't, if you guys are copying me, it's not really you guys being creative. So I just want to, talk about that and make you kind of understand what creativity is like, and how things evolve. Like, we didn't get, Cuban Salsa and Kizomba just like that. Like, and Kizomba is really easy to see because it's went through a very fast evolution where, like, they had samba, and then, they got influenced by the Latin American music, especially zouk and compa, and they started, playing that at their parties, and they wanted to dance to it. They didn't know the dance of zouk or compa, so they adapted what they knew to that music because it was different sounding, so they danced different, and that started, that created more or less Kizomba. And then when it went to Europe, people started adding R&B and different things, and also just the availability of technology to make your own music on a computer and all of that with DJ software and things, like, made the music evolve in a different way. And now we have, what some people call urban kids, or there's not one, but Kizomba is evolving in a lot of different ways because the music is evolving in a lot of different ways. And then you have, like, your taraxa, all of that. But it's about people, and taking a stand, I think, and doing what they feel is right for them. And for me, I'm all for that, as long as they understand what they're doing, I guess. Like, again, because I was talking about being able to give, especially when your partner dancing is a language. So you do need to have a foundation of the language. So, I mean, it's easy to understand this analogy if I talk about the actual language. So if I'm talking to you in English and you only speak English, I have to use a certain sentence structure and English words for you to be able to understand what I'm saying to you. So if I start, not making, the verb in the right place in the phrase and all that stuff, you're going to get a little confused. And then if I start adding, French words and German words and whatever, you're going to get really confused, right? And someone that might speak those three languages might understand me, but the average person wouldn't. So just think about, like, the fact that Cuban salsa or Kizomba, they're languages, and you can use the English language to write the phone book, or a recipe, or write a beautiful poem, write the worst paper anyone's ever written on earth. Or make, I don't know, write a, book on history. There's so many ways to use the language. You can, talk to people in a really fun, relaxed way, or you can go, have a very formal conversation with the queen. It's all the same language, but it sounds very different and it's used in very different ways. So I just caution people to remember that, it's, and this is another reason why I personally like to practice solo dancing, because when you're solo dancing, you can deviate from everything and you don't have to worry about your partner. And that's also another great way, at least to me, to really develop your creativity, because if you always have to think about your partner and leading what you're doing, it's really challenging and hard, at least I find, to really be creative and to really just feel the music and do, what you're feeling in the moment and explore, because you have to be able to relay that to your partner. So I find it a lot easier to just kind of put on music and just play and give myself some, as I said, some kind of exercise that I'm working on to kind of bring out some creative aspects. And then when I'm dancing, and on another completely other side of things, I'm working on my technique and, the basic foundation of the language. And then when I dance Kizomba socially, yes, I have my foundation that I'm using to express, or Cuban Salsa is the same thing. But I also have kind of ideas that might pop up in my head because I tried a bunch of different things. So when a song comes on, I might add some elements of that when I'm dancing. And I find that when you practice both of those things, they end up coming together. And then you're both a good technical dancer, so you're clear. Your partner understands what you want. You're on your axis. You're not falling over. You're on the beat. All those things that are kind of important to have a good dance. But you also make the dance fun because you bring your own personality, your own ideas to the dance. So it's never just a generic dance where you're trying to just execute steps. Because steps, you can use them, as I was saying, to, write a recipe or a really exciting adventure book. So one might be more interesting than the other. So yeah, just be aware that it's kind of like your steps are just kind of the start at the end of the day. You want to use them to express yourself. That's kind of, at least to me, kind of the goal. Which, when you have a partner, is a little bit more challenging, really, than just putting music. And dancing by yourself. And that's why I really recommend partnered social dancers to dance by themselves, to explore their creativity, because it will make a big difference over time. Okay, so that was the first 20 minutes of the class. We're going to move on to Kizomba. And I'll get up and move around. All right, so we are talking about breaking the rules. So the whole class today is a little bit going to be about breaking the rules. So we have our basic walk, which if you took the last online class last week, was a lot about your technique in walking. So we talked about, dropping the hip but staying, engaged, and moving from your knee and rolling your foot and all of that. And I'm not going to repeat everything. But there was a very specific technique that made you walk in a very specific way, so that when you connect with your partner, it's going to be smooth. You're going to be able to hold your connection, but also transfer the signals you want to transfer so that your partner knows what is happening and can follow you, or vice versa. So today I want to talk about how to break those rules. So one of the things I like about Kizomba is you can pretty much break almost all the rules. but you do still have to understand how to keep a connection so that you can still dance with your partner. So when, in traditional Kizomba, you have basically two different positions that you use. You have your basic walk, like I was just doing, which is more upright, and they use a little bit more low, depending. And then they also have their Tarashinya position, which if you've ever taken my classes, I basically get there by bending one knee, keeping the other leg straight, then staying at this height and meeting my other knee. Sorry, so we're at the same height, and that's your Tarashinya position, because a lot of people go a little too low, it's tiring, and it doesn't look as good. So this is kind of the two basic positions that there was. Although they did, change a few positions, like with the hip stuff. Sometimes they went higher or lower. They did like a bigger movement sometimes. But basically they were almost always in those two places. But in the more, like urban kids and Taraksa, whatever you want to call them, because I don't really know what to call them sometimes, they're using different flows. So this, again, to me, comes from the changes in the music. Because your music changed, sometimes walking like this just didn't feel right to certain parts in the song. So because of that, they developed different techniques, with influences from different dances. So one of them that I like to call the suspension. So when we're in suspension, what we're doing is we're bringing a very slight bend in your knees. So we're not up straight, but we're also not in our Tarashinya position or Taraksa position. So we're just a little bit bent. And then we are going to lift up by straightening the standing leg. And I'm going to keep the bend in my other leg. So I'm supposed to make it, and the leg that doesn't have the weight. And if I keep the bend, it basically makes my foot come off the ground. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to walk. So it's a little bit like you can picture walking on the moon. Or I like to say it's like you have suspenders and you're like pulling it up and over and up and over. So it looks kind of like you're walking on the moon, like it's very soft and kind of light. You can do the same thing backwards. And you'll notice a very important thing if you look at the size of my steps. So when I'm doing that, I'm really generally not clearing my toes, which when we're dancing a regular Kizomba, we're trying to usually clear our toes or, our whole foot. But in this one, we're going to go to small steps. We're not going to try to clear our toes because it is not a moment where we are going to do like leg pushes and leg lifts. We are going to concentrate on micro movements whenever we're in this kind of, I like to call it suspension. So we're going to play with your weight and the amount of bounce. And we can add some movement from your hips and things, but we're not going to do a lot of steps. So this feels really good to certain slow songs where you just want to kind of like, especially when there's a lyrical part to the song where you can go like, and just kind of breathe with the breath of the singer. And maybe I can try to put, because the song has nothing to do. Sure, this one. And maybe it feels better than me doing this, right? So another thing that I use a lot, maybe I'll bring it down just a little bit. Okay, so is a little bit more tension in my legs, because usually we have like a push from the floor that like, and then you have like, you know, your straight legs and all your joints contracting, coming into here, and it's connecting with your partner, and then we have a really strong connection with the floor. So that makes it really clear whatever you're doing. However, when you're staying like, I'll exaggerate, more like this, you don't have that happening. So how do I feel the weight transfers? Because when I'm moving my hips, you know, up and down and transferring my weight and pushing into it and pushing into it, again, exaggerating a little bit so you can visually see, like you can really feel those changes and you know which foot your partner's on. However, if you look from the front, I'm not really moving my hips much, and I'm not swaying much from side to side, and it's not really good for giving weight transfer indications. And you can kind of guess, but it's good to be a little more clear. So what I do to be more clear is I engage my like ankle and my calf muscle. So like when I go down, I like kind of engage into it, and then I resist. So I kind of resist to push up with my calf. And what that does is you can feel that muscle transferring into here. So that resistance gives kind of a more clear indication of the weight transfer to your partner. And it also looks a little cleaner. So let's see. Let me do it wrong and just relax into it. So it's a lot harder to kind of go slow and control, because if we're not engaging, it doesn't really work as well. So if I'm engaging now, I can really have that look of suspension and really let control. But I can't really do that meaningfully in the movement as much, and also in my leading and following, if I'm not engaging. And that is my main trick really for all the other flows in Kizomba, is to engage the muscles. So another flow that we use sometimes is like a tense up of your whole body. So we have movements like these, for example, or these. So although you look like you're doing something interesting. Okay. So although you can look like you're doing something, it's not necessarily feeling. And it's the same thing. It's not going to look quite the same. So if I'm just like doing relaxed, like more relaxed, to say, it's not very sharp. So all these movements, you want them to be sharp. So what I'm doing, I'm taking a step, but I'm taking a step tensing up all the muscles, and then I'm tensing up my back muscles, and then I'm like pushing into the floor. But I can't move very much because I'm very tense, but I'm also tense in my whole upper body except for my neck and my arms. And then I can do really sharp things and look almost like this is kind of things that come from popping and locking and all that stuff from hip hop. So it's this like tension and release, tension and release, tension and release. So that really helps to be sharp. So if I'm trying to do like the circle and I'm not engaging very much, it's going to kind of look like this, versus if I'm engaged, I can even go like twice as fast, and it's a lot more sharp and straight. So whenever you're trying to do anything, you know, it doesn't have to be like several steps. It can be one step. So if I'm like doing a basic 2, for example, and I want to do like a sharp stop or tap, I'm engaging my leg. I'm not just touching and coming back. Because if I'm touching and coming back, you see, I'm not engaging anything. So what am I, especially as a lead, what am I leading? How am I leading this? I'm doing it, but I'm not leading it, right? So how does the follow know to put her leg out there and to tap when she's not feeling the floor or any weight change or the floor or your body going to the side? So maybe she'll feel like a faint little thing and maybe she'll do it. But if you want it clear and sharp and you want her to also tap very sharply with you, you change a little bit of weight, you know, engage your foot, you keep the ball up, and you switch a little bit of weight. It's going to be very sharp, it's going to be very clear, and because you're transferring some weight, your partner's going to feel that. So once you start changing the flows and you're incorporating some relaxation and some tension, as a follower, you really have to become sensitive to that. So, you know, if it's like, because we haven't talked about the other extreme, like we can go and we can go do the other extreme where like everything is slow and relaxed, and instead of being up here, we're going to go like down, and we're just going to like stretch everything, right? So how do we know to do that, to let our bodies go there as a follow, right? So if you're walking and suddenly your partner wants you to relax your joints and go with him. So how you know is feeling the tension that's in the body and following, right? So for me, like, especially when we're changing the flows, following the knees is going to be, for a follow, is going to be the most important. So making sure that you're keeping, as we were talking last week, when we're walking, we're leading from the knees, And what that's going to do is going to allow you to feel more, first of all, the height of your partner and the tension in your partner's body. And you want to try to pretty much all the time match that tension. And that's going to allow us to dance together. And if the lead is using this tension well, it will be, and if you're understanding how to listen to it, it's going to be very clear. But I mean, it's just like levels. Like I can be dancing here and drop the level to here, but my partner can still be here and not have realized that my shoulders went and my whole body dropped, right? So it's all about, especially for the follows, it's about learning to listen more and to really tweak your awareness. So I always say, start with your foundation in Kizomba, learn how to walk, learn your basics, because the differences between things and the leading is so minute, at least in the way that I dance it, that you're not going to be able to feel the difference at first. You need to kind of grow into your awareness of the difference. It comes over time. So to be a really good Kizomba follow, it takes a little bit of time and practice. So where are we at? Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. So as I was saying, we've got basically, I would say, I like to play with 3 main different flows. And the one of them is, as I said, suspension. We have the tight, which we can use in a lot of different ways, right? Like you can play with this. It doesn't have to just be like a robotic, you know, one of my teachers used to call it a cookie cutter. So you're stuck in the same position and you're just kind of leaning all your weight from side to side, if we exaggerate a little bit. But you can play with that, you know, just being really tense and pushing the floor. So I think understanding your connection to the floor when you want to do really minute things is really going to help you. Because if I'm trying to do like this, like I'm just exaggerating so you see, like I'm just lifting my feet, but I'm not really like transferring much weight. It's going to be really hard to follow. So if you've ever tried to do like by just touching like that, you'll see that the follows have a really hard time most of the time to follow you. However, if you tense up your legs especially and your core, and you like transfer some weight and like push, like almost like you're gonna like try to squash a bug, okay? You want to kill a bug, so you're like putting your weight into it, you're pushing the floor, and then you're squashing another bug, squashing another bug, squashing another bug. So if you have that like bounce, I also like to say it's like a bounce because you're pushing the floor and you're trying to lift off. So you're trying to like, you know, have like push into the floor, so it's like a spring, so it springs your leg back up. So if you understand how to use that, it's going to be much, much clearer for your partner. And you can use this here, like if you want to do like, instead of just walking, if you want to, you know, follow some kind of other beat in the music, maybe I'll put something that works for that. So instead of like just walking, and you can really play with that, right? You can just follow the instruments and the music. So you don't, and for both suspension and for this kind of stop motion, call it, the floor is your best friend, really. And the other one, oh, yes. So the other thing that these allow, so the suspension, yeah, this is kind of, okay. The suspension allows, usually you stay straight, right? Your upper body stays straight. However, when we're tensing up our whole body, we're able to break a Kizomba rule, which is that we always stay over our axis. Our body is going to physically stay straight, but we're going to kind of lean it, like exaggerate, we're going to lean it forward and back. So, as a follow, if you keep the connection with the knees and the chest, you're just going, and you also feel the tenseness of your partner and match it, then we're going to be able to go together and it's going to feel good. There's going to be no problem, right? If your partner doesn't understand any of those three parts, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But she matches your tension and she just keeps the connection, you're going to be able to do that. But those kind of leaning movements require more use of muscle or a bend. So the other way you can do it is by over bending. So, and this would be like a whole different song. So if we're going to go to a slow song, we wanted to like milk the movement. So we want to kind of sink into it. So you can see I'm leaning forward, I'm leaning back, past my axis. However, both my knees are bent. So if I was walking with one leg straight and doing this, you're going to find right away it's going to be really hard for your follow to follow you. However, by having a stronger center, a lower center of gravity, having your knees bent, you're able to move it a different way. And then this type of movement where you are getting off your like axis, but not really because you're still within your center of gravity, then we're going to be able to play. And although it's quite relaxed, if I don't tense up this leg, I'm just gonna fall on it, right? So I am tensing up to be able to control the movement. And also, same thing, pushing into the floor. So the base of the movement would just be almost to do like a figure eight. So you're falling and coming up and over and falling and coming up and over in a really controlled way by using the tension in your muscles, like by contracting, if you want another way, contracting your muscles so that you hold yourself up. But then you can add the stop motion within that. And I like this one because if your follow is able to join you in the kind of sway back and forth, you're able to, using the floor, do a lot of musicality without doing a lot of steps, because it's a lot harder if I was trying to lead a saída and slow it down and speed it up and all those things. It's a lot harder for a follow with not too much knowledge to follow you. When if she's a feeler and you're able to get her to or get your partner to match your energy, they're able to do a lot of three flows, right? Of using the suspension and the tightness and the like lyrical, we'll call it lyrical, use of lyrical movement. So, all right. I think it's probably time for the last 15 minutes. So we're going to switch to our salsa. Okay. Just give me a minute to switch over. Conga. Let me go to some salsa. Okay, keep it slow. All right, so time for some salsa. So, what can I say? Yes, let's just regroup a little bit, go into Cuban salsa mode. So, what I want to talk about is a little bit about timba. We're going to talk about breaking the rules again with Cuban salsa, being a little bit of a rebel. So, Cubans are always evolving. They're always inventing new moves. That's kind of the thing that they do. Also inventing new music and pushing the envelope in a lot of different ways. Although sometimes, they also, want you to do things a certain way. But what I like about timba, personally, is that it allows you to have way more self-expression than a lot of different styles. Because you're doing a lot more solo time in your dancing, but you're also expressing the music in a lot of different ways. So and the music is very interesting because it's very diverse. There's a lot of different sounds. There's funk sometimes and reggaeton, and there's old rhythms like mambo, cha-cha-cha. And you can kind of go from one to another. But again, to dance timba, you have to be kind of well versed in the language of salsa, and not just salsa, but the language of Cuban dance and music as a whole. So it's a little bit challenging, but for me, it's one of the most interesting ways to dance Cuban salsa, because you can really dance in a way that matches the music. And that's really what timba is about more than anything else. It's about dancing to the music and expressing yourself to that music. So, we have our, like a regular tumbao, not tumbao, sorry, guapia step that we do in, our 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. But all the Cuban dances are on 8 counts. So it can be your rumba wawonko, it can be your cha-cha-cha, your mambo, pilon, all the Afro, like Orisha dances, all of them are pretty much all on your 8 count. So you're using your 8 count in the music differently. You're basically creating a different rhythm. So I like to think when I'm dancing salsa this way, that my feet are an instrument in the music. They're doing a rhythm that's part of the music. So I can change the rhythm I'm doing with my feet, but that doesn't change the measurement, the way the music is. It's still 8 counts. So that means that you have to develop, to dance well timba, you have to kind of develop a sense of the 8 count in your head, and you know where your 1 is and where your 4 is and all those things, right? So that you don't get lost. And if you do, it's okay. You can have a laugh about it, wait for your partner, and go back on the beat. Typically, it's the woman that's more responsible to keep the beat, because the guy often tends to style more. But in timba, it really gets more to be equal. And I do want to mention, and I've talked about that in classes before, Cuban salsa is not universal. So there's a lot of differences between styles, first of all, within Cuba. There is also different trains of thoughts. Not everyone likes the idea of timba and changing and playing with the rhythms and stuff like that. Timba is more from Havana, where there's more influences because it's the main city. So a lot of the other places are still more traditional in their way of dancing. So there's been more influences in Havana from hip hop and, rock and roll, funk, all those things that, we are influenced by too. And, it's never a closed system. Like, salsa had influences from swing and all kinds of other stuff, rock and roll, you name it. So there's a lot, basically, there's a lot of possibilities. So let me explain to you guys a few things. So first of all, for me, I like to understand the step and how it fits with the 8 count, whatever step I'm doing. And then once I understand that, then I work on transitioning, because the hardest part for your brain is not going to be learning these different steps. It's going to be transitioning from one rhythm to another. And from teaching this stuff over the years, I've realized that for most people, it's a lot harder transitioning from a different rhythm than transitioning into a different turn pattern, because your brain gets used to, the constancy of what's happening. And even if there's a lot of things changing, there's still that like metronome beat in their heads that you kind of get used to. But when you're constantly changing that up, it's a lot harder. So I find that, there's not, people have to have a lot of training or like really, have an understanding or an innate thing to be able to dance timba well, because a lot of people, it's like too mechanic. Because you also don't want to think too much. You want to understand it, and then you want to kind of forget it and just express yourself, which is why I was talking about the duality at the beginning of class, where you want to practice your foundation, your steps, and understand your technique and all that stuff. And then you want to have the creative aspect on the other side. And the two come together, and that's where the magic happens. Anyway, but you have a lot of people who are better at one or the other. So a lot of creative dancers are very creative, but they're not always very clear or very clean dancers. And then you have very clear, clean dancers, but they're very mechanical in their dancing. So when you can get the best of both worlds together, that's like the best, right? So we're going to talk about what you can do to your basic steps. Let me just get my paper so don't forget. So an easy one is the cha-cha-cha. So cha-cha-cha is one of the ancestors of salsa. So the rhythm was slower. So if we're dancing to this song, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. A little louder to make sure I'm on the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Then we want to go to cha-cha-cha. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're just adding the cha-cha-cha like on the 3 and 4, right? So 1, 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. And you can see that I'm not doing like cha-cha-cha would be a lot slower, right? And we would be using a lot more hips when we're integrating into a salsa. We're not going to do that because you don't have time. So it's really just going to be the shuffling of the steps. So da, 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 da. And then we have the mambo. So if we're doing just the straight mambo, like which we would do more solo, so it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, and you just keep doing that, right? You can also do it in your guapea and change it a little bit to integrate it to your salsa. But basically, mambo is also a kind of branch of an ancestor root to salsa. I'm going to slow this down so I don't have to go so fast. I'll explain it better. Okay, so we're basically, we're starting everything on 1 and finishing everything on 8, which is what I mean by we're using our 8 count. So we're doing for mambo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're ready to start again. I'm doing the falls part right now with the right, but you can start with your left with your leading. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can see I'm just tapping right under where I'm at, not in front, just right where my toe is. I'm still lined up. And I'm just going opposite arms. And there's a lot of different styling you put on that. I don't want to go too much in that because we don't have too much time. But basically, we want to stick to the rhythm of the 8 count, right? We can also do it in a variation for salsa, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which I did in the last online class, I think, because we talked about guapea, so you can check that one out. Then we have Afro. So if we're adding Afro to your salsa, there's a lot of different steps. And the salsa steps come from Afro. So we can go with like something like this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. So that one exists in a lot a lot of different ones. I haven't practiced my afro in a while, but there's different, either you're playing with a skirt, or this one is like usually chopping with an imaginary sword, which is an easy one to remember for most people. Or there's one like clearing energy, there's like a piece where you're like, but it's the same step. It's kind of a hold and step and hold. So you can go, you'll see Cubans doing, this kind of movement all the time when they're dancing timba. So that's an easy one to practice. It's a very, very common one for Afro. So 1, 2, 3, and hold, and 5, 6, 7, hold, and 1, 2, 3, and hold, and that's almost like where cha-cha-cha comes from. Then we have Pilan, which some of those steps start on 8. So 8, 1, 2, 3. Oh my god. Okay, this is hard to do counting. 8, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're still using your 8 count. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's hard to count, and some of it is not really quite, it's not quite on the 8 because it's a little faster. But you're still on your 1. This is 1, 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, sorry. And 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. So you're still using that. All right, Pilon is a dance that is both like when they were breaking down the sugar canes. They had a big, piece of wood and a mortar, and they were crushing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So they were crush, 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 and they would get the stuff off of the sides. And that became a dance called Pilan, which the main step is ta, ta, 8, ta, 2, 3, ta, ta. And then you can just use that fast part, ta, 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 8, ta, ta. So there's 2 ways of using it. So one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or, as I was doing before, 1, 2, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's kind of hard to do it really well and count it at the same time, but that's the idea. So either 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It's a lot easier to count like that, than to try to count the 8 count, but it is on the 8 count. So another one that they use a lot is reggaeton or funk-based movements. So easy ones are just kind of the sway, or like circles, or just kind of a wave. You can go to more intense ones, doing things like that if you want. But it's like bringing down what you're doing. So instead of using all your beats, you're going to do like 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7. You're not going to do basically all your weight transfers, but you're kind of keeping your awareness of where your 1 is. So that's a lot of things you can do. Let me try to find a song maybe. I don't know if I have a song on here. There's some easy songs in here. Let's see. It's too much reggaeton. That's a fun one. Alright, so I have, a few different variations, but this one's a good one for like playing with cha-cha-cha and mambo. This is, a more reggaeton version. So obviously we're not going to start doing like, it's not in the music, right? So if I'm, talking now, it probably makes more sense this way. And if I do this kind of stuff, it's going to make a lot more sense, right? Alright. And I didn't talk about Wawanko, but Wawanko is another big one. But anyway, that can give you like ideas of things you can play around with. I kind of always make it a little more complicated just by like listening to the music, and the music's not very loud too because I want to be able to talk over it, so I'm not gonna hear everything. But yeah, I forgot to talk about rumba wonko and the options. So rumba wonko is another main root of salsa. So we're following like the main step. We'll say the main step is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for that step, the main difference is we're like pushing into the floor and we're coming back, like we're not transferring and lifting. So 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, 7, and there's a lot of different interpretation of rumba wonko, how you want to feel it. What I like to say is that you never, and I believe that for all the dance really, if you're really like in that moment and expressing yourself, you shouldn't be doing any step the same ever. And what I mean by that is not like you can't do like the same turn pattern or anything like that, but it's the feeling behind it, the styling behind it, just the flow of it is going to be always a little bit different because it's going to match that moment in the music with that partner, in the way you're feeling in that moment. So rumba wonko is really about that. So although we have our basics, like if you're a guy, this way, we want to like express with it. So there's a lot of songs that have that. This one kind of has some. Well, not really. Let's see. I should have prepared some songs for this before. All good. Oh, this busy's good. No. Well, Actually, yes, there is a back rhythm. And you can play, when you're dancing by yourself. That's the beauty of rumba where you don't need to follow all the beats with your feet all the time. Although, if you're dancing with a partner, you might want to, in the salsa setting, you might want to do that a little bit more. And you can go to salsa, right? So the fun thing between the difference between rumba and salsa is that it's almost on the same beat. It's just the flow that's different, right? So right now it doesn't really feel good to do this where it did at the beginning of the song, but if I'm doing the same step, really, your feet are going in the same spots, right, at the same times. But if I'm going back to the beginning of the song, if I'm going this, it's feeling weird, right? So, but I'm just adapting. I'm just not doing that weight transfer. Instead of doing a bounce, but I can still keep that 8 count. So that's what I mean. And you can see it doesn't really match well. It's starting to match more as the instruments come on and the beat transforms. So that's what we mean by timba, we're dancing to the music. So in the 3 examples I gave you, if you do the moves, the other moves that I did is probably not going to feel right, as I showed a little bit. So you just want to try to find something that matches with the music. And, at the beginning, when you're trying to dance salsa, let's just wrap up a little bit. So yeah, when you're first learning to dance salsa, and I was the same, you're not even going to be able to recognize a salsa beat from a completely different rhythm because your ear is not trained to the music. I mean, I started dancing salsa when I was 21. I'd never really, I'm from Cape Breton. I had never really heard a lot of Latin music in my life, And if you played me a bachata song, a merengue, and a salsa, I, at the beginning, couldn't tell the difference. Now I can tell between, the different styles that it is, all the instruments that are playing and all of that. But that's really true listening to music. And practice, right? Over the years, I've just trained my ear to be able to listen more. And there's nothing wrong with that. Dance at your level. I'm just here to give, ideas of how you can train and understand more and become a better dancer. But do it at your own pace, at your own level. If you've danced for 10 years, if you've danced for 2 months, you're probably going to get something different out of this class. But all that I want out of any class that I teach is to get at least one thing, out of that whole experience. And if every time that you come to a class or you take a class or, you join me online for a class, if you learn one thing, even just one thing, you're improving, and try to put that one thing in practice. That's the other thing. Sometimes, we're in class, oh yeah, I got this pattern or I got this step, but if you don't practice it often, you forget it very quickly because it's not ingrained. So it's just you've gained the understanding, but you haven't put the practice behind it to integrate it. So if you don't practice, it's going to take, you're going to forget it and then you're going to learn it again and forget it. So practice is a really powerful thing to advance as a dancer because it allows you to retain things. So have fun. Be creative. It's good to just forget about everything, all your steps, and just dance and have fun sometimes. As I said, it's kind of the 2 sides of the equation that you want to try to find balance between is being creative and crazy and all of that, and also being very methodological and learning your steps and building your foundation. So especially in social dancing, a combination of the 2 is really going to bring everything together. So hope you guys had fun with me today and learned something, and we'll see you guys next week. All right, thank you.